All right, welcome everybody. Today the title is Camouflaged Believing. And this is the fifth week that I've taught on this. It's my final teaching on the basics of believing. And these 5 teachings on believing should be enough to help us correct some of the ingrained mistakes that affect our believing at its root level. And we've seen over the past few weeks that 1, self-talk is the foundation of our believing. And 2, that a pack of apex thoughts introduced into the ecosystem of our minds will back off the weaker thoughts that wear us down. 3, we learn that forgiveness is a gift that we give ourselves. It takes out our emotional trash and frees up our mental space so we can believe. And number 4, today we're going to see how love completes forgiveness. How love feeds our apex thoughts. And how love rejuvenates our self-talk. Love allows us to see enough to put our believing into action. And this is just the basics. There's a lot of other places we can go with believing, but these 4 basics are what will get us started. And together these 4 points become our mental masterpiece so that we can see clear enough to receive what God has already given us. And these are the building blocks of basic believing, and these will guide us through the camouflage to our abundance. And so today we're going to learn to see through the devil's camouflage. And today we learn to find out what's been just out of reach. Love sees through the camouflage. Question: if God has already supplied all our need, if God has already healed us, if God has already made prosperity to rain down on the good and on the evil people of this earth, why do we experience God's goodness so randomly? You know, the answer to that question is found when we look beyond the visible. And both believing and walking by the Spirit require absolute trust and unwavering confidence. And we must believe that we're able to see past the devil's camouflage job and into our expected abundance, or we never will. What is camouflage? You know, camouflage hides an object by confusing signals to the brain, simply put. And these disruptive, distractive, or blending patterns obscure a form's outline, making objects less likely to stand out. It can be a combination of materials, colors, any stealthy ingredients that make a person or an item harder to find. There is one level of camouflage that's almost impossible to detect because it's been built in to our fiber. It's been built into humanity over the centuries. You know, many of us have heard that the adversary, the devil, the great enemy, conceals himself in our culture. And that's all good and true, but this is only partially true. And it really doesn't help us a bit because we already know that. You know, if he was walking around in a red suit with a tail and horns, you would know easily what to avoid. But it's not like that. His specialty is not in hiding himself. His specialty is disguising the blessings of God that were given to each of us specifically, so we don't see him. He is masterful at keeping God's goodies out of sight. Let's call it the camouflaged cookie jar. You know, camouflage doesn't need to be high tech. It just needs to hide a treasure long enough for the pursuer to pass. That's all it needs. And that's all he has to do is distract us enough to not see what God's already given. I think about back in the days when I was a Boy Scout, when I was a kid. And we played this game called Fox and Hounds. And half the troop was were foxes and half of them were hounds. And I always liked being the fox because I was pretty good at hiding. And I always carried on the campouts this blue Air Force blanket. And then I would find a moon shadow of a tree, and I'd lay down in there and throw this blanket over me. And I never once ever got discovered because I basically blended in. They weren't looking for that. And but it's a type of camouflage. It was simple, something household. But I remember one time when I lived in Japan, I went off base. In fact, I climbed over the fence and went off base at the corner behind where the water tower was, so no American would see me. And I actually went off base to catch butterflies. Had a little butterfly net and a little cage. I think I was 9 years old, maybe 10. And I thought it'd be better because there was a cherry orchard right at the edge of the base that some papasan had. Well, they didn't like us roaming around on their property. So this one day, this papasan saw me, and he chased me back on the base. I hopped the fence, and I ran, holding my butterfly net and basket in hand. He hopped the fence and chased me onto the base, which he shouldn't have done, but he did. And so I was running, and he was running. I was a little bit faster. Even at 9 years old, I was probably a foot taller than this World War II vintage Japanese guy. And so I ran around one housing complex, and I ditched the net and the basket. And then I had this reversible jacket I always wore, so I took off my jacket and I reversed it to a light color. And then I thought in my mind that maybe we all look the same to them like they look the same to us. And so I stopped running, changed that jacket, walked around that house, and I just walked, and I saw this papasan look at me and then look back and look at me and look back, and I just kept walking like I wasn't. And he actually just shrugged his shoulders, went back behind the water tower, hopped the fence, and went on, and I went home. So, maybe we do all look the same. But what it was, I just changed one thing. I dropped what I was holding, changed the jacket, and then he really couldn't recognize me anymore. Plus, I wasn't running from him. And the adversary has hidden what God wants for us. If God's already given us everything we'll ever need, it's a promise. Health, prosperity, whatever. And we don't have it, then something has to be blocking us from seeing that. What is it? I'm calling it camouflage today. Love and believing. See, believing is an absolute persuasion, a targeted confidence based more on trust than immediate knowledge. Love is the energy that makes things happen. Love gets things done. True love, godly love. Galatians 5:6, don't turn there, but it says that believing is energized by love. This is all a tandem. We talked about self-talk. Then we talked about, which is the foundation. And then we went into the next step, apex thoughts, putting in groups of thoughts, packs of thoughts to back off the enemy that's already in our head. Then we talked about forgiveness. It takes out the trash. It clears away so we can think straight enough to believe. Now we're talking about love. And love, believing's energized by love. A guy named Dwight L. Moody said, "Faith makes all things possible. Love makes all things easy." Somebody named Zora Neale Hurston said, "Love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place." We want our mind to climb out from whatever rock that it's been shoved behind. We want to be free peoples. See through the camouflage. And this is the point of this teaching. If we don't have what we want or need, if we keep praying for the same thing over and over and over again, yet come up empty, there must be a problem. You know, if God's already supplied all our need, and for some reason we just don't or can't see it, it may be time to learn a new truth. We need to learn to see through the camouflage. Now, some people have trained themselves to detect and expose their enemy. And certain trained military and probably law enforcement, they can detect standard camouflage, somebody wearing that in basically 0.2 of a second in their field of view. They train themselves to do this. And some of the best, the newest, most adaptive camouflage, it may take them up to 12 seconds to see it. This is just statistics that I looked up. How long should it take us to see through the devil's camo and find our abundance? Find our target treasure? Well, how long does it take to master the simple art of believing? That's how long it takes. You know, this is our answer to life's quest and to life's questions. I'm going to tell you about the 4 M's of camouflage now. The 4 M's. Now, the world and science says that there's 3, and they're named crypsis, mimesis, and motion dazzle, and I'll explain. But I say that there's 4, and the 4th one's the one we're really targeting today. But here they are. First one is crypsis, or mysterious, the first M. And it makes something hard to see. It's like a leopard in the grass, or a computer encryption, or a military battle dress uniform. It just makes it a little bit more mysterious, harder to see. The second one is mimesis, or mimic, and it disguises them as something else, like the insects that might look like a stick or a leaf, or that fish that looks like a rock, or the flounder that looks just like the riverbed or the bay's sand, or that tree bark camo you see so many people wearing that mimics what? Tree bark. That's mimic. And then the next one's motion dazzle. And it took me a little bit longer to figure this one out, but it confuses the observer momentarily. It could be like a flashbang, you know, that a law enforcement, or zebra stripe is motion dazzle. You know, and at first I was thinking, black and white stripes of all the foolish camouflage that God designed. But then again, when you think about it, their biggest predator, the lion on the savannah, are colorblind. But when and zebras run in herds, do they not? And so now you got all these stripes and these movements, you know, moving, and it's hard for them to figure out what's head or tails. And to a big predator, the head and the tail makes a big difference in how you take an animal down. So that motion dazzle just stops it just for a moment. It confuses it just for a moment. During World War I, they painted ships with crazy geometric patterns. This was motion dazzle. It was just to confuse an enemy gunner enough so that they might miss that ship. And I'll send pictures of that on the web. It's crazy what they did. I never knew that till this past week. You know, I mean, it's come, camouflage has come a long way over the years. I mean, God pretty much perfected it. But then the adversary, the devil, who was once the angel of light, he learned how to use camouflage, against ourselves. So it's against ourselves. Now the fourth one is to modify behavior. And this one's the most devious. This is what we're going to hit today. And most people have been trained by their families, their friends, their jobs, their culture, their society to limit their own believing. Hence the term history repeats itself. You ever wonder why history repeats itself? Because it's just well-worn ideas passed down to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next worker. And it just goes on and on and on. Ad nausea. It's super effective and it's self-perpetuating. From generation to generation, the world has trained us to limit our believing, to not see what we're supposed to see. We're trained to be blind. Isn't that crazy? You'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. Yeah, it's something. Camouflage is a multi-billion-dollar industry, especially in the military and in the out-of-doors markets. And you see it everywhere. You see teens wearing it, adults wearing it, duck hunters wearing it. It's all over the place. Here's a new technology. A guy named Guy Kramer, who's a world-renowned designer of camouflage from Canada. And he recently announced a product called Quantum Stealth. And this is a material which bends the light around the holder of this fabric and focuses what's on the background to what's to in front of the person holding that piece of fabric. It's much like the Harry Potter's cloak of invisibility, or that old movie Predator, where they would just blend in they would look like trees or what have you. And what was science fiction a few years ago is nonfiction today. And I'm going to send you a bunch of links on the web for this. And why am I talking about the light bending ability of quantum stealth? See, if a human can bend light to hide an object, what can the ex-angel of light do to camouflage what is rightfully ours? Think about it. Here's another deep thought. If God is light and love, and Lucifer was the angel of light, he was also the angel who most had mastered the art of love. Isn't that crazy? He knows that love is the key to believing. It's the master key. And if he can get us to not love at the level that God designed love to be loved at, then we'll never believe at the level so we can do the works of Jesus Christ and greater, where we can find the abundance, the exceeding abundance that's promised us according to our believing. It amazes me how Jesus Christ trained himself to see through the devil's disguise, even during the worst of times, even within his personal upbringing. He wasn't raised perfectly, yet he remained perfect. If he can do it, we can do it. We can do the same works as Jesus Christ if we're willing to do the same prep. Think about it. Behavior modification, the fourth dimension of camouflage. This is so covert that the world doesn't see it. It's so hidden that wars start because of it. Families hate each other. We hate cultures. Today we are going to cover this fourth dimension of camouflage and the way to beat it. And this is the one that trains us not to see our intended target of believing. This is the one that that is inbred into families and into societies. This is literally, I've said this for the last 4 weeks, but this literally will be the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, is to love. It's the hardest work in life. It's totally against the course of the world. If you think about the course of the world, think about the tenets of the devil: to steal, kill, and destroy. Think of it this way: he comes to steal your believing, to kill your believing, to destroy your believing. That's the course of the world. He comes to steal your dreams, to kill your dreams, to destroy your dreams. That's really what he's here for. Think about it. That's all he can do. He can't hurt your eternity. All he can do is mess things up now. So what he's really here to destroy is people's believing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It has to be. We're going to see how the enemy's concealed himself in our believing, to conceal God's abundance from us from within. We've been trained not to see what's rightfully ours and to accept the scraps offered by society. It's slavery, folks. To give up our will. I thought about this for a few years. If we keep praying for, let's say, health and wealth, and we don't receive it, what's up? Why? If God we say this all the time, God promised abundance, yet we personally don't see it enough. Why? He promised health. It's already been done. It's a done deal, yet we don't see it. Why? There's a hitch in our believing. If we keep setting certain goals each and every year and never seem to reach them again and again and again, what's up? Houston, we have a problem. It's really that simple. If you listen closely to the rest of this teaching, you may see a few tips that'll help you see through the devil's camo job. It's nothing new. God's tried to teach this to his humans for not just hundreds, but thousands of years. He wants us to see his blessing through the deception. And you don't have to turn there, but Psalm 78:41 says, "Yea, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel." See, this was written during the time of David, but it was talking about the time God, via Moses, rescued the children of Israel and helped them escape slavery. How long had they been there? 400 years or something? Long time. They left Egypt not as slaves, but as wealthy nomads. They got it. As a whole, the children of Israel, they got it. Moses said it, they believed it, boom, we're leaving. They demanded jewels and money and jewelry and gold from their once tormentors, and they gave it to them. And they left rich. Unfortunately, the children of Israel turned back in their minds to their old way of thinking, choosing the relative safety of slavery over the reality of salvation. Sounds like people today. I was listening to a radio talk show host this week, and he was hot and bothered. And this kid had called, a young man, and he was scolding this young man and calling him out on his passion. And the young man said that he wanted to change this country and was ready to take it to the streets, gun in hand. And the talking head asked, he goes, "How many of us in the media that you listen to do you think will join you in this fight? And the kid said, all of you. The talking head said, none of us are going to follow you. We just talk. He said, if you carry this out, you will end up dead. Now, this is a guy who promotes all this stuff and, this talking, what people say and what they do aren't the same things. The kid hung up. The word limit in Psalm 78:41 is tavah, T-A-W-V-A-W, which simply means to scratch a line. This is the limit of my property. You scratch a line, you set up a fence, you put up rocks, you put up a privacy fence, whatever it is. This is my property, you stay on your side, and I stay on mine. This is as far as my believing allows you to go, God. You're not welcome any further. That's limiting God. See, we limit God by limiting our believing. This is the key, folks. It's so simple that we miss it. And we're so used to hearing the word believing that we don't believe it anymore. It doesn't mean anything. Like the word love. Immediately you're looking at your watch and going to sleep, when a preacher or somebody brings up the word love. I'm telling you, this is the key. Mark, come out of that room. I'm not coming out of this nice, comfortable, padded room. I feel safe in here. I even like this white jacket they put me in. It feels all snuggly. Come on out. Come on out of that room, Mark. It's amazing out here. There's abundance. It's excellent out here. Nope. I don't want to. I'm used to it in here. I'm comfortable. See, we're the ones who limit what God has already given us. We want to stay in our padded rooms, stay in our bummer room, stay in our society, our culture. Whereas love, it speaks louder than all these things. See, there's 4 steps to basic believing that helps us eradicate and jettison our limiters, which we've already talked about. The self-talk, the apex thoughts, the forgiveness, and now love. That course of the world, it's still the course of the world is really our lack of believing. We just float along. We allow it to happen. And it's time to stop it, folks. Paddle upstream if you can. Personal discovery. What we're about to read was spoken by Jesus right after he had just healed a bunch of people, a lot of people. This is early in his ministry. And that happened just days after he had chosen his 12 apostles. Now imagine how nice that would be to have 12 guys who ended up following him around for 1 year. These were some faithful dudes. They left everything, friends, family, finances. They were committed. And that was just days after he'd been tempted in the wilderness for 40 days by the devil himself. Jesus Christ was on fire. He was like a plane that was in full afterburner, just waiting to take off. The brakes are on, engines roaring, just waiting to be released. That's us when we believe. See, Jesus learned to see God's blessing while surrounded by the fog of war and the pain of hunger. You ever been real hungry? It's hard to think about anything else. Or been really sick? It's hard to do anything. You don't want to watch TV. You don't want to talk on the phone. You don't want to think. And he was able to get through all that stuff and the temptations of great abundance. It's hard not to see that stuff when stars are flashing in your eyes and all that, fame and fortune. He went through all that stuff. See, here's a quote. Love is of all passions the strongest, for it attacks simultaneously the head, the heart, and the senses. Lao Tzu. See, love is a decision to think of others like God thinks of them. That's love. The love of God is to love like God loves. Think about it. Everybody has these ornate and these fancy definitions of agape, the love of God. It's real simple. It's to love like God loves. How does he love? Well, you got to read it. There's a lot of things. Right here, we're gonna see right now. Go to Matthew chapter 5. And we're going to learn now about camouflaged believing. How we can learn to see what lies hidden. How do we find our treasure? How do you find your treasure? What do you really want in life? What do I want? Like I said before, police and military use these flashbangs and smoke to confuse the perpetrators. And then they break down the door, clear the room, and go have a beer. At least that's how the TV shows always go. The enemy does the same thing. He tries to clear you out of the room where the good is. See, Jesus wasn't impressed or distracted by the fog or the flashes or the bent light. Matthew 5:43. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. What's a quote from Leviticus 19:18? But only in Leviticus it leaves off the hate your enemy part. But it does talk about loving your neighbor. And love is the word, the love here in this verse is the word agapeo. So it had to be available to people throughout all time. If it's done at this day and time when Jesus Christ was, this agapeo. It's not new. And let me see. This, now got to remember, don't turn your mind off right now and think you totally understand what the love of God is. I'm going to show you a different angle here today. And if you can grasp this angle, you will learn to believe so that you can find your abundance, your health, your whatever. And love has many definitions, but this kind of love doesn't require reciprocation, this love of God. It asks for nothing in return. Brotherly love does. So does sexual love or physical love. They both expect something in return. The love of God simply means to love others like God loves them. It's big. Love is what drives forgiveness, which in turn releases our believing. Agapeo has no strings attached. It's heap, big, powerful love. Now, the word enemy in this verse is a noun, and it means a real enemy. It's a physical or spiritual or emotional enemy. I guess emotional wouldn't be quite the same, but Mahatma Gandhi said, where there is love, there is life. See, any culture, every religion knows this stuff. This is not new stuff. This has been around since Adam and Eve. Verse 44, but I say unto you, love your enemies. Remember, this is Jesus Christ talking. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Now, remember what he'd just been through. Hadn't he been against the greatest enemy known to man, the devil? And now he said, love your enemies. Well, then Christian always go, well, that means it's somebody from your church that's not treating you so well. No, it's got to be much bigger than your church. It's got to be bigger than your family. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. Now, I think I don't even want to be around people who hate me. How can I do good to them? And pray for them which despitefully use you. Now, that's what to do. Pray for them that despitefully use you. And this next word's important, persecute you. Persecute means it's somebody on your rear. They're out to get you. It's a consistent, just think of a lion chasing those zebra, waiting for a weakness. You know, they persecute you. And this is a whole new level of love. It's not the love that locates, or this is the love that locates, uncovers, and ignites our believing. It's a type of love that forces us to elevate our mindset. You know, last week I went to the hospital with someone, and while I was at the reception desk, I smelled him before I saw him. And I had my back to this man, and I turn around, I look, and I realize there's a guy walking up, this old man, a little bit big, and he had on so much cologne that it sort of burnt my eyes. And it was enough for every man in the hospital to have had on, and it would have still been too much. And the receptionist said to him, "Woo-hoo, don't you smell good?" And he got this big old smile on him, and and it made his day. And then she told him where he was supposed to go, and he left. And then she said, and she didn't talk behind his back then, like most you see happen all the time. She said, I smelled cologne on a guy one time, and I liked what it smelled like. And I said, "What kind do you have on?" And he said, "Well, I have Stetson on, ma'am." And so she went out and bought Stetson for her husband. And then one day he put it on, and they got in the car to go somewhere, and she went, "Woo, woo." She goes, "What do you have on?" He said, "I just have that Stetson on that you bought me." She said, "Don't ever do that again." She said, it doesn't fit with your body chemistry. But I thought about how this woman's mind, she knew he had on way too much cologne, but she just blessed him. She thought about it and blessed the guy. It's a beautiful thing that's love. It's deciding to love, even somebody who might seem, out there. Verse 45, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Now that is such an amazing verse. I'm going to read it again. That ye may be the children of your Father, or may act like the children of your Father, which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Well, God is only good. God only helps, gives, comforts, heals. God is a giving machine. God supplied the need of everyone on earth. Even that person that you hate. It doesn't matter who someone is, good or bad, happy, sad, right or wrong, God can give only good. Now, this is a hard concept, folks, because we think you have to deserve good to get good. We're trained to think that, but that's not the love of God. That's not the highest level of love. This is a different place to take our minds if we really want to see the true abundance. If you really want to walk with dominion, may I be so bold as to say. Got to think bigger. Verse 46, for if ye love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And if you love the people who love you, you're just like the publicans. Okay, publican doesn't mean much, but we know that from study that it means a tax collector. Doesn't mean much. You give them your money every week from your paycheck, every 2 weeks. You don't complain much about it. But this first use of the word publicans represents people who were raised in Israel but decided to work for the much hated Roman government who had taken over their country. They'd been there over 100 years at this point. They collected taxes from the Hebrew people. And they got paid, but how they got paid was they had to charge more than the Romans required. And the tax collectors were cheats, and they were hated. Imagine if you knew you were getting ripped off every time you paid your taxes. And you saw this guy getting richer and building onto his big old house more and more and more. It would not be fun. That was a publican. Now, Jesus Christ is saying, if you love those that love you, what reward do you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? Yeah, they love the people who love them. Sure they do. Everybody does. Verse 47, if you salute your brethren only, salute means to embrace your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Don't even the publicans so? The second publicans is sometimes translated Gentiles. A Gentile is anyone who is not Judean. And this makes more sense in the context of love. And these Gentiles were hated by everyone in Israel. Most of the Gentiles they saw were who? Romans. They were considered human rejects by the children of Israel. See, Jesus is saying that this level of love is far beyond what we have been taught. This agape love that ignites our believing requires us to love people who have made themselves unlovable to us. It asks us to love people we were trained to hate. To have this level of love would make this world a better place, wouldn't it? Yeah. Think it could help a marriage? Think it could help in raising children? Or for those children in being raised by certain parents? Sure. I know what you're saying. I know what's going on in your head right now. How could I love that schmuck? You all got somebody in your head. You know, I've been burned too many times to go down that road again. Not me. Ain't gonna do it. Once bitten, twice shy. You know, I'm not saying to hang out with your tormentors, folks. I'm saying to love them in your mind and heart. Love is the completion of forgiveness. That level of love sets your believing free. It puts wings on believing. This is our greatest limiter, is the lack of this love of God. First, it starts with your attitude towards yourself, your self-talk. And then we start eradicating that by putting in the apex thoughts. Then comes forgiveness, which is good. You forgive people, they burn you, you forgive them. They ask for forgiveness, you forgive them. We get that. This is a whole nother level of forgiveness. This is forgiving people who don't want your forgiveness, who still hate you, who persecute you. But God says to think kindly of. Not an easy place to live. H.L. Mencken said, love is the triumph of imagination over intelligence. Love is the triumph of imagination over intelligence. Love is a decision. You know, make love so. Make it happen. Verse 48, be therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Okay, now, how the heck can you do that? How can you be perfect like God is perfect? Well, simply think like God. How do you think like God? You walk in love. How do you think God has? God believes too. There's verses that even say that. See, God doesn't limit himself to any other standard than his eternal perspective. Everyone who's alive after the judgment of the just is 100% perfect forever. That's how God sees mankind. When he looks at this guy, he sees him a long time from now because he's going to be with them a lot longer. That's how God sees people, with his eternal filter, with his long-range lens. We got to see people more than the hurt that happened to us as a child or as a young adult or as an adult. We have to see, how does God look at it? They're going to be, Jesus Christ paid for their sins already, didn't he? It's already done. So why do we hang on to that? That hanging on limits us. It's like just staying in the car when you need to get out of that car. I'm not leaving. Or you hang on. I remember one time when I was a paper boy, my mom, hardly ever, but maybe in 3 years of doing it, she drove us 3 times. And it was a cold, cold day. In Texas, probably 30. I don't know what it was. Something unreasonably chilly. And I had my paper bag over my shoulder, and I'd get out and walk along sometimes and throw the paper because you had to put them on the porches. And one time I got near the car, my mom took off driving. Well, the mirror sticking out grabbed the paper bag, and it started dragging me. And I was trying to run and keep up, with this truck, and I wasn't that fast as it was. So I started beating on the side. Finally, she realized that she, I was stuck. I didn't want to be attached to the truck when it was moving. You see, love releases you so you can do your job. Answer me this. So this is going to be a hard question. Does God love the devil?
Yes. Yeah.
Does God love the devil?
Yes.
Didn't Jesus Christ just talk about love your enemies? Hadn't he just recently had to deal with the great enemy? That's crazy. That's crazy talk, folks. But God can't do anything but love. And love doesn't mean, oh, come on in and hang around. It's just an attitude. That's what the love of God is. It's thinking of people like God thinks of them. God created that angel called Lucifer. He designed him in perfection. How many thousands of years had the guy had that thing lived perfectly? Now here's another caveat here, folks. Did you know you're going to have total and complete free will forever? And that you're still going to be you? Isn't that crazy? If it happened before, it's going to happen again. That's love. You're going to decide to love God forever. And we're going to have to continue to decide to love each other forever. So whatever perfection means, it's a state of mind, folks. To be perfect like God. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. That's wild, verse 48. See, God's love, he's light, and he has no room for hate, for regret, or darkness. There's too many apex thoughts in God's psyche, so to speak. There's no room for anything else. Does God see evil? Yeah, how can he not? Does he hear it? Yes, but he processes it out with love. If he can do it, Jesus Christ is saying we can be perfect like that too. This is not easy, folks. We too can leave no room for darkness. Now I'm going to read this section from the Message. It's just a little more groovy. Before that, here's a quote from John Wolfgang von Goethe. Love does not dominate, it cultivates. Here we go, verse 43 from the Message, Matthew 5. You're familiar with the old written law. Love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer, and then you're working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. He gives his best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone regardless. The good and bad, the nice and nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner can do that. That's the end of that section there. See, we're raised to limit ourselves by limiting our love. And when we limit our love, we limit our forgiveness. We limit our forgiveness, we limit our believing. When we limit our believing, we blind ourselves into what is rightfully ours. It's so simple that we miss it. First, you got to see yourself wonderfully. Every thought, every time. And to help you do that, you put in those apex thoughts. Could be one word, could be a verse, could be a poem. I don't care. But you put in that stuff, and then it'll start backing the enemy back into the dark recesses. You're never going to forget, folks. It's stuck, unfortunately. But love. Then the next one is forgiveness. Then when we forgive, it just hauls out the trash. It's like you've been painting that ugly painting your whole life about yourself or about what you don't want to happen. It's hauling out the junk and painting what you do want. Take the time. And then finally, walk in love, which really is the key to the whole kit and caboodle. It's the key to life, a good life. You know, God's already supplied everyone's need, whether they're good or bad. And he does this because he is love. Albert Ellis said, "The art of love is largely the art of persistence." Be persistent in training yourself or retraining yourself. Be persistent in loving the people that you should love, the ones who love you back. And then in addition to that, be persistent in not speaking or thinking ill of anybody. God doesn't. We too must learn to love the unlovable. Love like we've never loved before. It's possible and it's necessary. And if we're ever going to see past the camouflage of the devil and find our full promise abundance, we have to live this way. Once again, a review. Here are the basic building blocks of believing. 1, self-talk. Self-talk builds our foundation. We build our foundation by being aware of and controlling what we say to ourselves all day long. This is our base, our foundation. Remember the Leaning Tower of Pisa, a big building on a small base, soft soil. See, the builders knew better, but they kept building on a soft, faulty foundation anyway. See, reset your foundation by retraining your self-talk. Be the tower. Number 2, apex thoughts. A pack of apex thoughts will correct our personal ecosystem. Release top thoughts and phrases into our minds so that they back off the weak, gnawing thoughts that gnaw down the beauty of our believing. Like those 31 wolves which completely changed the environment of Yellowstone Park soon after they were released. You know, this happened because they backed off the gnawing elk and the park came back to its original intent. See, release packs of apex thoughts into our minds via words, phrases, slogans, verses. be the wolf. Should say be the wolf pack. Number 3, forgiveness. Forgiveness is the brother to believing. Sort of the yin and the yang kind of thing. Forgiveness takes out the emotional trash that we've hoarded since that first real hurt. Believing requires us to paint our mental masterpiece, while forgiveness requires us to stop painting what hurts us. Jesus coupled forgiveness with believing too many times for it to be a fluke. Be the masterpiece. And number 4, love. Love is the greatest power on earth. Love is the fuel that powers forgiveness, which in turn empowers believing. Love is the only tool on earth that allows us to see through the camouflage and find the incredible healing and abundance that God has specifically laid out for us. Be love. Robert Louis Stevenson said, "You can give without loving, but you can never love without giving." So the final comment, live love, and you will love living. God bless.